Today's story is titled, Aliens Called Human Children Easy Prey Until They Discovered the Power of Hide and Seek, a thrilling adventure where resourceful human children outwit their alien captors using nothing more than their favorite childhood game. Written by Out2World team, this tale explores the unshakable ingenuity, creativity, and resilience that even humanity's youngest can muster when faced with overwhelming odds. So sit back, relax, and let your imagination take you beyond the stars. The Zarkon vessel hovered silently over the rolling fields of Kansas, its sleek black hull blending seamlessly with the night sky. Inside, a squad of Zarkon scouts, tall and angular with skin like polished obsidian, watched their monitors with detached curiosity. Primitive species, fragile, predictable, Commander Zyrak muttered, his voice a low rasp that echoed through the control room. He gestured to the screen, where a group of human children was gathered around a campfire, roasting marshmallows and laughing. Easy prey, minimal risk. The Zarkons prided themselves on efficiency. Their mission, gather specimens for trade in the galactic market. Humans, especially young ones, were rare commodities. The Zarkons considered this a routine task. On the surface, the children were oblivious. 12-year-old Max Anderson poked at the fire with a stick, his messy brown hair catching the flickering light. "You ever think about how many stars are out there?" he asked, his voice tinged with wonder. "Yeah, and how none of them have s'mores," muttered Kayla Ortiz, a wiry 10-year-old with a sharp tongue and sharper instincts. Nearby, Ethan McGill, the youngest at 8, was building a precarious tower of marshmallows. "I bet aliens have better snacks," he said, giggling. The kids' banter was interrupted by a sudden, eerie hum. The air grew heavy, and the ground vibrated slightly beneath their feet. The laughter stopped. Max stood, squinting into the darkness. "What was that?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. Before anyone could answer, a beam of shimmering light enveloped them. The world tilted, and the campfire vanished. The kids felt a lurch, as though they'd been yanked into the sky, and then darkness. When Max came to, he was lying on a cold, metallic floor. Blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights, he sat up and took in his surroundings. The walls of the room were smooth and seamless, glowing faintly with an otherworldly hue. A faint hum filled the air, vibrating in his chest. "Okay," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "This is not a dream. Definitely not a dream." A groan from his right caught his attention. Kayla was sitting up, her face scrunched in irritation. "Where the heck are we?" Max shrugged, trying to mask his rising panic. "Not Kansas anymore." Ethan was huddled in a corner, clutching his knees. "I want to go home," he whimpered. "We all do," said Zoe Parker, the quiet one of the group, her voice calm despite the fear in her wide eyes. "But freaking out won't help." Before anyone could respond, a section of the wall slid open with a hiss, revealing a Zarkon guard. The alien's piercing yellow eyes scanned the room, its tall frame ducking slightly to fit through the doorway. "You are aboard a Zarkon vessel," the alien intoned, its voice deep and emotionless. "You will remain here until further notice. Cooperation will ensure your survival." "That's comforting," Kayla muttered under her breath. The door closed, leaving the kids alone again. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the ship. Max stood, his fists clenched. "We're not just going to sit here, right?" "No way," said Kayla, joining him. "If these creeps think they can just grab us, they've got another thing coming." "What can we even do?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "They're aliens." Max crouched down beside him. "Yeah, but they don't know who they're messing with. We've got brains, right? And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's surprising people." Kayla smirked. "And breaking stuff." Zoe, who had been examining the room, gestured to a vent near the ceiling. "I think I found our first move," she said. "If we can get up there, we might figure out where we are and how to get out." The kids exchanged glances, a spark of determination igniting between them. Let's show these aliens what Earth kids can do, Max said, a grin spreading across his face. In the Zarkon control room, Commander Zyrak observed the children on his monitor. He watched them gather beneath the vent, using their limited resources, a loose panel, a discarded rod, to construct a makeshift ladder. Pathetic creatures, he muttered. They can't possibly escape. Beside him, a younger officer tilted his head. But, should we intervene? Zyrak waved a dismissive hand. Let them tire themselves out. It will make them easier to control. Unbeknownst to the Zarkons, the game was just beginning. The vent cover clattered softly to the floor as Max hauled himself into the narrow duct. The metal felt cool against his palms, and the hum of the ship was louder here, vibrating through the confined space. He wriggled forward, his voice muffled as he called back to the others. Plenty of room, if you're a noodle. Kayla smirked as she hoisted herself up. Good thing you're setting the bar low. Behind her, Zoe and Ethan scrambled into the vent, their movements less graceful, but determined. The group paused, crouched in the dim space, listening for any sign the Zarkons had noticed. Think they heard us? Ethan whispered, his voice quivering. Doubt it, Zoe replied. They don't seem like the observant type. Kayla rolled her eyes. Yeah, they're smart enough to kidnap us, but dumb enough to leave a vent leading out of the holding cell. Classic villain move. Max grinned despite the tension. Let's hope they stick to the script. The group pressed on, navigating through the labyrinth of ducts. The metallic air grew warmer as they neared what Max guessed was the ship's central systems. He peeked through a grate and caught a glimpse of a sprawling room filled with blinking consoles and Zarkon operators, their angular forms moving with mechanical precision. Control room, he mouthed to the others. Too risky. They continued crawling until the vent forked into 3 paths. Max paused, his brow furrowing. Which way? Ethan pointed to the left. That one smells like cookies. Kayla raised an eyebrow. We're not following your nose, McSniffer. Zoe tilted her head, listening. The middle path has the strongest vibrations. Could lead to the engine room. Engine room sounds good, Max agreed. We find the power source, maybe we can mess with it. Meanwhile, in the Zarkon control room, Commander Zyrak was oblivious to the children's escape attempt. He stood before a monitor, examining Earth's data files with a mixture of disdain and confusion. Humans spend significant time in activities labeled as play, he remarked, his tone incredulous. What possible evolutionary advantage could this serve? The young officer Zyron hesitated. Perhaps it sharpens their problem-solving skills, Zyrak scoffed. Ridiculous. Their problem-solving skills are irrelevant. They are specimens, nothing more. As Zyrak turned back to his work, the lights flickered briefly. He frowned, glancing at the consoles. What was that? Zyron shook his head. Unclear, Commander. Back in the vent system, the children were making progress. The middle path had led to a maintenance corridor lined with pipes and panels, all humming with energy. Max dropped down first, landing softly. The others followed, their eyes wide as they took in their surroundings. This is insane, Kayla whispered. It's like a sci-fi movie. Except we're the heroes, Max said, running a hand along one of the panels. And this is where we blow stuff up. Zoe knelt beside him, inspecting the alien tech. Not sure we can blow anything up, but we might be able to shut something down. What about these? Ethan asked, pointing to a cluster of glowing conduits. They look important. Important, or the alien version of Christmas lights, Kayla muttered. Zoe pulled a hairpin from her pocket, a relic from her earlier attempt to keep her hair tidy, and began probing the conduits. Sparks flew, and a low alarm sounded, echoing through the corridor. Uh-oh, Max said. Time to move. They darted back into the vent system as the sound of heavy footsteps approached. The Zarkons, alerted to the disturbance, began scanning the area, their yellow eyes glowing ominously. In the control room, Zyrak's patience was wearing thin. The alarm had disrupted his study of human behaviors, and the consoles were displaying erratic readings. Report, he barked. Commander, there's an anomaly in the maintenance sector, Zarkon replied. A disruption in the power grid. Zarkon narrowed his eyes. Send a team to investigate. As the Zarkon guards mobilized, Zarkon turned to the monitor showing the holding cell. It was empty. His jaw tightened. The specimens are gone. Zarkon glanced nervously at the screen. It appears so, Commander. For the first time in his career, Zarkon felt a flicker of unease. Find them. Now. The children regrouped in another section of the ship, their breaths coming in quick gasps. Max leaned against a wall, grinning despite himself. Okay, that was close. Too close, Zoe said, shaking her head. We can't just run forever. Then we hide, Kayla said, her eyes gleaming. Let them think we're everywhere and nowhere. Ethan tilted his head. You mean, like hide and seek? Exactly, Kayla said. We split up, find the best hiding spots, and let them chase their tails. Max nodded. And while they're busy, we figure out how to turn this ship around, or at least send a signal home. Zoe looked skeptical. And if they catch us? They won't, Kayla said confidently. Not if we play the game right. As the Zarkons searched the ship, they found themselves facing a new and unexpected challenge. A faint laugh echoed through the corridors, followed by the clatter of a misplaced tool. A guard rounded a corner, only to find an empty storage crate rocking slightly. They are toying with us, one guard hissed, his voice tinged with frustration. Impossible, Zarkon snapped over the comms. They are inferior beings. And yet, as the game of hide-and-seek began in earnest, the Zarkons realized that their prey was far more cunning than they had anticipated. The Zarkon guards stalked the corridors of their ship, their long limbs moving with mechanical precision. They swept the area with scanners, which flickered uselessly, unable to detect the human children who had found refuge in the most unlikely places. Inside a hollowed-out compartment beneath a console, Max stifled a laugh as a guard lumbered past, muttering in Zarkonian. Beside him, Zoe whispered, "They're getting frustrated." "Good," Max replied. "Frustrated means sloppy. Sloppy means we've got the upper hand." In another part of the ship, Kayla crouched inside a supply crate, peeking through a narrow crack as two guards argued over whether to check the same storage room for the third time. She couldn't resist a quiet snicker. Aliens with advanced tech, and they can't even agree on a search pattern. Meanwhile, the hidden children began to piece together the workings of the Zarkon ship. Ethan, who had wedged himself into an air duct, studied the patterns of the lights on the walls, noting how they dimmed or brightened in response to nearby activity. "Looks like they've got motion sensors," he whispered into the crude comm system the kids had rigged using loose wires and a handheld device Zoe had scavenged. "But they don't pick up heat. That's why they can't find us." Zoe's voice crackled back. "If we can exploit that, we can keep them spinning in circles." "Already ahead of you," Kayla chimed in, her voice smug. "I've been setting off their scanners every 5 minutes. They think I'm everywhere." "Classic misdirection," Max said. "Nice." In the Zarkon control room, Commander Zyrak's frustration was mounting. He watched the surveillance footage as his guards stumbled upon empty hiding spots, discarded debris, and the occasional maddening sound of laughter echoing through the ship. "These humans are elusive," Zarkon said hesitantly. "They are pests," Zarkon snapped, "and pests are exterminated." "But Commander," Zarkon added, his voice cautious, "they are not behaving as we predicted. Their actions suggest strategy, coordination." Zark's yellow eyes narrowed. "They are children." Zarkon gestured to the monitors, which now displayed garbled static. "And yet they are evading us." The children's next move came in a burst of inspiration. Max had stumbled upon what appeared to be a secondary control panel tucked away in a forgotten corridor. He stared at the alien symbols, his mind racing. "Zoe, you're the tech genius," he said, calling her over the comm. "Think you can crack this?" Zoe crawled through the vents to join him, her hair sticking out in all directions from the static buildup. "Let's see what we've got," she said, examining the panel. With her hairpin and a lot of trial and error, Zoe managed to decipher the basic layout of the controls. "This looks like environmental settings," she said, pointing to a series of glowing buttons. "We can mess with the lights, maybe the gravity." "Do it," Max said, grinning. "Let's make things uncomfortable." Moments later, the ship's lights began to flicker unpredictably. In some areas, the artificial gravity fluctuated, sending guards tumbling awkwardly. In the control room, Zarkon gripped the edge of a console, his anger boiling over. "Sabotage!" he roared. "They are sabotaging the ship!" Zarkon hesitated before speaking. "Commander, they are exploiting weaknesses in our design. Perhaps—" "Do not finish that thought," Zarkon growled. "Find them, now." The children's confidence grew as their tactics began to wear down the Zarkons. They communicated through their makeshift comms, coordinating distractions and traps. Ethan used his small size to sneak into a storage bay and rig the motion sensors to constantly trigger alarms. Kayla, ever the bold one, used an alien tool to carve human stick figures into the walls of high-traffic areas. "Gotta leave our mark," she said with a smirk. Even Zoe, normally quiet and methodical, couldn't resist a bit of mischief. She rewired a comm panel to play snippets of Earth music at random intervals, the cheerful tunes contrasting sharply with the tense atmosphere. The turning point came when the children discovered a map of the ship. It was crude, drawn on a scrap of material they'd found near the maintenance corridor, but it gave them an idea of the ship's layout. Max traced a route with his finger. "Here's the plan," he said. "We keep splitting up, but we'll converge near this section, the central hub. If we can disable their main systems, they'll have no choice but to negotiate." Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Negotiate? You think these guys are the negotiating type?" Max grinned. "Not really, but they'll have to listen when we've got control of their ship." Zoe nodded. "It's risky, but it's our best shot." Ethan, though nervous, clenched his fists. "Let's do it." In the control room, Zarkon was pacing, his sharp footsteps echoing against the metal floor. "We are the superior species," he snarled. "How are we being bested by a group of pre-adolescents?" Zarkon, who had been silently observing the monitors, finally spoke. "Commander, they are utilizing tactics we do not understand. They are playing." Zarkon froze. "Playing?" "Yes," Zarkon said. "Human records indicate that their young develop skills through games. What we are experiencing is a game." Zarkon's jaw tightened. "Then we must end it." But as the children continued their carefully orchestrated chaos, it became clear to the Zarkons that this was not a game they could win. The Zarkon vessel felt like it was alive and angry. Lights flickered sporadically, alarms blared at random intervals, and the gravity shifted without warning, sending unsuspecting guards tumbling into walls or floating helplessly mid-air. The children had turned the ship into a playground, and the Zarkons were the unwitting participants. Max crouched behind a panel in the central hub, his heart pounding. The hub was the nerve center of the ship, a sprawling room filled with consoles, glowing conduits, and a towering holographic display of the ship's systems. This was their target. He pressed his comm button. "Kayla, status." Her voice crackled through. "2 guards down the corridor. They're arguing about whether the gravity glitch is a malfunction or an attack. Idiots." "Keep them busy," Max said. "Ethan, Zoe, are you in position?" "Almost," Zoe whispered. She was perched inside a maintenance duct above the hub, her hairpin ready to sabotage the power relays. Beside her, Ethan was wide-eyed but resolute, clutching the alien multi-tool they'd found earlier. "Ready when you are," Ethan said, though his voice wavered slightly. Max smiled grimly. "Let's do this." Kayla was in her element, darting through the corridors like a shadow. She'd perfected the art of baiting the Zarkons, leaving behind subtle signs of movement, a scuffed floor, a faint laugh, before disappearing into impossibly small spaces. The guards chasing her were growing more frantic by the minute. "Come out, human!" one of them growled, its voice echoing in the empty corridor. Kayla smirked from her hiding spot inside a storage compartment. "Why don't you come find me?" she whispered to herself. She tapped her comm. Max, your diversion's working. They're too busy chasing me to notice anything else. In the hub, Max signaled to Zoe and Ethan. Zoe began her work, carefully disabling the power relays one by one. Sparks flew, and the hum of the ship's systems grew uneven. Ethan monitored her progress, his small hands steady despite the tension. "Almost there," Zoe said. "Just a few more." The door to the hub slid open with a hiss. 2 Zarkon guards stormed in, their glowing eyes scanning the room. Max froze, his breath catching in his throat. "Stay hidden," he whispered into the comm. The guards moved methodically, their long limbs casting eerie shadows against the walls. One approached the console where Zoe and Ethan were hiding. Zoe gritted her teeth, her hand tightening around the hairpin. "Don't move," she mouthed to Ethan. The guard reached for the console, its claws inches from the panel. Suddenly the ship lurched, the gravity failing again. The guard stumbled, its head smacking into the edge of the console with a dull thud. It crumpled to the floor. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Is it dead?" "Unconscious," Zoe replied, her voice calm. "Let's move before it wakes up." Meanwhile, Max crept toward the central console, his eyes darting between the remaining guard and the holographic display. He spotted what he was looking for, a terminal labeled, at least to his best guess, as Main Systems Control. He plugged in the device they'd rigged earlier, a Frankenstein creation of wires and circuits they'd scavenged from the ship. The screen flickered, alien symbols scrolling rapidly. "Zoe, I need you down here," he whispered. She dropped down from the duct, landing softly beside him. "You're lucky I can read gibberish," she said, smirking. She began working, her fingers flying across the terminal. "Give me a minute." "We don't have a minute," Max muttered. The remaining guard was growing suspicious, its yellow eyes scanning the room. Kayla chose that moment to make her entrance. She burst into the hub, waving her arms dramatically. "Hey, Glow Eyes! Over here!" she shouted. The guard turned, snarling, and lunged at her. Kayla sprinted toward the far side of the room, dodging cables and conduits. She vaulted over a console, narrowly avoiding the guard's claws. "Max, whatever you're doing, do it faster," she yelled. "Working on it," Max replied, his voice tense. The ship shuddered violently as Zoe activated the final relay. The holographic display flickered, then went dark. Alarms blared, and the ship's lights dimmed to a faint glow. "We did it," Ethan said, his face lighting up. "Not yet," Max said. He turned to the others. "We need to send a message back to Earth. Let them know where we are." "Already on it," Zoe said, tapping into the terminal. "I'm rerouting the comm systems. Give me 30 seconds. "We don't have 30 seconds," Kayla shouted. The guard was closing in on her, its claws swiping dangerously close. Ethan, without thinking, grabbed the alien multi-tool and threw it. The tool hit the guard square in the face, stunning it long enough for Kayla to slip away. "Nice shot," she said, grinning. Ethan shrugged, blushing. "Beginner's luck." The terminal beeped, and Zoe's face lit up. "Message sent," she said triumphantly. The group regrouped at the center of the hub, their expressions a mix of relief and exhilaration. But their victory was short-lived. The door to the hub opened again, and this time, Commander Zarkon himself stepped through. His yellow eyes blazed with fury. "Enough," he growled. "You have disrupted my ship for the last time." Max stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "You messed with the wrong kids." Commander Zarkon stood motionless, his angular form dominating the entrance to the hub. His piercing yellow eyes scanned the group of children, and his lips curled into a sneer. "You think you are clever, human spawn," he growled, his voice reverberating through the room. "But your little game ends now." Max stepped forward, trying to mask his fear. "Funny thing about games," he said, his voice steady. "Sometimes the underdog wins." Zarkon advanced, his claws glinting in the dim light. Behind him, a squad of guards filled the corridor, their glowing eyes locked on the children. Max?" Kayla said, her voice laced with tension. "Now's a good time for a plan." "Working on it," Max replied, his mind racing. He glanced at Zoe, who gave him a subtle nod. "Buy me 30 seconds, she mouthed, crouching behind the console. Max turned back to Zarkon, raising his hands in mock surrender. "All right, you caught us. But let me ask you something. Ever heard of Earth Games?" Zarak's eyes narrowed. "Irrelevant. You are insignificant." "Oh, I don't know," Max said, backing toward the console. "I think you'd like hide and seek. We're pretty good at it." Before Zarkon could respond, the lights flickered and went dark. The entire hub plunged into chaos as Zoe's handiwork took effect. She had disabled the last of the ship's power systems, plunging the vessel into emergency mode. Red emergency lights flickered to life, casting eerie shadows across the room. The Zarkon guards hesitated, their movements uncertain in the dim light. "Now!" Max shouted. Kayla darted toward the group of guards, tossing a handful of alien tools she'd scavenged. The guards flinched, momentarily distracted as the children scattered in different directions. Ethan ducked behind a conduit, his small frame blending into the shadows. He reached for his comm and whispered, "Zoe, what's next?" "Keep them busy," Zoe replied. "I've almost got the navigation systems under our control." Ethan nodded, his hands shaking as he picked up another multi-tool. "Time to see if I can aim twice." He hurled the tool at one of the guards, hitting it square in the chest. The guard staggered back, snarling in frustration. Nearby, Kayla had climbed onto a stack of crates, using her vantage point to shout taunts. "Hey, Glow Eyes! You couldn't find us with a map and a flashlight!" The guards lunged for her, but she jumped down and slipped into the shadows, laughing. Max and Zoe worked quickly, their hands flying over the alien console. The ship's navigation systems were a mess, but Zoe's earlier sabotage had left a critical vulnerability. "Got it," Zoe said, her face lighting up. "I've locked the ship on a course for Earth." "Perfect," Max replied. "Now let's make sure they can't change it." He grabbed a loose wire and jammed it into the console, causing sparks to fly. The screen went dark, and the hum of the ship's systems faltered. Commander Zarkon roared in frustration as the ship's systems failed around him. "Enough of this nonsense," he bellowed. "Guards, seize them!" But the guards hesitated. The ship was in chaos, and the children's relentless mischief had taken its toll. The once intimidating Zarkons now looked disoriented and unsure. Max stepped forward, his confidence bolstered by their success. "You might want to rethink that," he said, his voice firm. "Your ship's headed to Earth, and trust me, you don't want to meet the grown-ups." Zarak's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, the ship jolted violently. The children's sabotage had disabled the stabilizers, sending the Zarkons stumbling. "Retreat!" Zarkon barked to his guards. "Regroup and secure the bridge." The guards filed out, their movements clumsy and panicked. Zarkon shot one last glare at the children before following. As the door slammed shut, the children erupted into cheers. Max grinned, his face flushed with adrenaline. "We did it." "Not yet," Zoe said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We still have to land this thing." Ethan blinked. "Land it? How?" Zoe gestured to the console. "I've set the course, but someone has to make sure we don't crash." Max stepped forward, his grin widening. "Guess that's me." Kayla raised an eyebrow. "You? Do you even know how to fly an alien spaceship?" "Nope," Max admitted. "But I've played a lot of video games. How hard can it be?" The group groaned, but there was no time to argue. Max took the controls, his hands trembling as he guided the ship toward Earth. Hours later, the Zarkon vessel descended into Earth's atmosphere, its once pristine hull scorched and battered. The children had managed to contact Earth authorities, who were waiting with a fleet of rescue ships. As the Zarkon surrendered, Commander Zarkon glared at the children one last time. "This is not over, humans." Max smirked. "Oh, it's over. And next time, maybe don't underestimate us." The children were hailed as heroes, their story quickly becoming the stuff of legend. News of their ingenuity spread across the galaxy, earning humanity a new reputation. Unpredictable, resourceful, and not to be trifled with, even at a young age. Back on their home planet, the Zarkons implemented sweeping changes to their protocols, banning the capture of humans and instituting mandatory creativity training for their officers. Commander Zirak, however, remained haunted by the memory of those defiant Earth children. As for Max, Kayla, Zoe, and Ethan, they returned to their normal lives, though they would never forget their adventure. And whenever someone asked how they managed to outwit an entire alien crew, Max would shrug and say, "Sometimes all it takes is a good game of hide and seek."